Dawson, well, a good long pass will take by Atkinson. Atkinson's away. Atkinson's not going to be caught. He's only going to stop him going round behind the post. And a brilliant try. Still to Atkinson. Atkinson's taking him on down.
Tell us about John and what kind of man John Atkinson was.
Well, he was crazy. He just was. He was, I was just saying to Alan earlier, he was very... He had got some flaw in him, that his brain, he didn't always work in the best way, ever. He was really brave, he was really strong. He was really courageous, he was fun, he was crazy. But he was also driven by demons all his life, that I think possibly people who knew him from rugby might have found him a bit standoffish or a bit arrogant, but a lot of that came from this depression and issues that he dealt with from being a kid. So there really were kind of two halves to him.
Alan, you played with John for many years. How did the two of you first get to know each other?
Right. Well, he signed for Leeds in 1965, but going back to when I signed for Leeds in 1962, when I made my debut in August 1962, I was a left winger. Only played on the left wing. And then they signed this lad from Rugby Union, Roundhead Rugby Union, John Atkinson, and he's a number 5, five. And so it's the first time I met John, when you're walking and everybody's made welcome. It's the lads, isn't it? Yeah, 5, you see, right. So he's a left winger. And I thought I was a left winger. But one thing was quickly determined, that I had to go to the right wing if I was going to do anything at Leeds. I was quickly determined. And we can exaggerate for a laugh, but the fact is, John was destined for the first team and didn't want no A-team rugby. I just loved the A-team. I was learning my trade, never played rugby till 1961. I'm at Leeds in 62, and I loved the A-team, but John, he was only signed for one thing. He wanted to be in that first team, you see. So I think I wanted a bit of what John could do, and John hung about with me because he wanted a bit that I could do, and he wanted to know how I could just nudge him away, and I wanted to know how he could take him on the out. So we were always competitive, particularly in training. And it just emerged as a unique friendship, I think. As we were both so different styles of rugby.
You were both so different as people as well, weren't you?
Yeah. But we were both attracted to one another. I think I wanted a bit of what he had, and I think he wanted a bit of what I had.
Rugby league was a very tough sport. It still is a very tough sport, but back then in the 60s, lots of tackles around the head, lots of incidents of head injuries and concussion and head trauma, which you took for granted. How was it for you and John back then?
Yeah, well, we were always getting the head shot. Coming on from inside, particularly, you'd I soon dismissed my teeth, from a elbow coming in, youngster, not bad. But yeah, and the impact thing, you'd always get somebody hitting you around the head. Somebody would get you and you hit around the head, and we just. Now we're talking about it, we just accepted it, really, and none of us thought at the time, I've played some games. I remember Trevor Foster ringing me home when I didn't know where I was. I'd got concussion playing at Batley, of all places, head hit the floor, And so we can all pick a time out when we've had concussion and you stay on the pitch. Third test in Sydney, I came in, I've got the second row came down blindside, and I remember going in, bang, we both went down, and I remember nothing else about that game. And I stayed on that pitch, and so did, what was his name? But he never came down blindside again. But you get on with it. It's frightening, really. Now we know this, that it took you off.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think possibly what fans don't appreciate, if they are fans of the game and not players of the game, is the true physicality and the cost of that physicality. Because you see, I've watched rugby all my life with my dad, and you see somebody get banged to the ground, and then they get up, and like you say, they're tough men, they carry on playing. But then, when you are the wife of somebody, you see that they're in agony for days afterwards or weeks afterwards. And in latter life, as well as John having dementia, he'd got rheumatism. I don't think there was a bone in his body that hadn't been broken at some point or other. So I think there's a lot of the physicality of the game that fans probably brush off. And because the players themselves brush it off, I think loved ones see the true impact of the game much more than fans do. John wouldn't have changed it.
No.
Even, I mean, obviously with his dementia, he didn't have a level of awareness of his dementia. But with regard to all his aches and pains and breaks and everything else, he used to say, what he gave to me, anything is worth what he gave to me. You know, a kid from a council house in Leeds, I travelled the world, I met ambassadors and senior people, the camaraderie of the team was amazing. But his girls would say, yeah, but we lost our dad at 71 and we really lost him sometime before that. And if that could be prevented in future, that would be a good thing.
When did John's symptoms of memory loss or first begin to show?
That's really interesting, because John had left the police force, he'd retired from the police force, and he'd got another job because he was still relatively young. So he was working for the Leeds Mental Health Care Trust. And his boss was seeing things. Now, he was coming home from work, I was working, so we'd spend a couple of hours in the evening together. And I thought his boss had some other kind of different agenda, but she was referring him to their occupational health unit for 3 years prior to him finishing work. And she thought he was being insubordinate because she was giving him tasks to do and meetings to attend, and he wasn't doing any of those things. And I used to say to him, well, why aren't you doing it? And he used to say, well, I don't want to. But I don't think he knew he wasn't following instructions. And it was only when he finished work and I was spending more time with him that I thought, oh my God, there is something wrong. And when I was telling Alan and Catherine, you found it difficult to believe, didn't you? Because at first, so if you spent an hour with him, he was fine. If you spent 2 hours with him, you realised that you were repeating hour 1 in hour 2, and the same in 3, and the same in 4. And a lot of people in the pub would say they thought I was making it up. And it was only when his symptoms got worse that people were like, oh my God. But I think also he tried to mask it as well. So it was just a forgetting of things to start with. But then his behaviour started to be a bit erratic, and that's when I thought there's something wrong. But it took me 3 years to get the diagnosis.
How old was John when this happened?
So his boss started picking up problems. He will have been about 61. He was 71 when he died. I got a diagnosis in October 2014 and he was dead by Christmas 2017. Adult social care and the NHS were split asunder by Margaret Thatcher. So you kind of fall into a hole. And we were recommended a private support club called the Rainbow Care Group, who were amazing. But in terms of anything else, there's a lot of information for spouses of people suffering in terms of how to help your person with dementia. But there's not a lot of actual help, practical help from outside.
Things like respite care.
Oh, so respite care. In the period of me caring for John, it went from it should be every 12 weeks to it should be every 3 weeks, but I never got any at all. I was very lucky because he was always, even, you know, when we're talking in his late 60s, 70s, he was a big, strong man. But he became very gentle, thank God. Because if he'd been vicious or, what's the word I want? Aggressive, yes. He would have had to go into a care home. And he would have got a funded place because he was aggressive, but that wasn't the point, because John, as a policeman in a care home, would have said, "You've imprisoned me falsely." And he would have been on a psych unit because he would have then got aggressive and violent. So he kind of descended into a mellow state.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
But we once went to a garden centre. We went to a garden centre, and Catherine and I decided we'd wander off and look at the plants. And we said we'll leave Alan and John having a coffee here.
Yeah.
And John was going through this phase of he'd randomly thump his hands on the table. We could hear him as we were walking round, and Catherine said, "Shall we go back?" And I went, "No." And when we went back, there was Alan looking white as a sheet, and everybody who was having a meal had migrated to the back of the garden centre.
Yeah.
And John was there banging his hands on the table. Berdang, berdang. And he'd approach children. The trouble is, he looked big and strong and fit when his brain really wasn't in that place. So he'd approach children, and he'd talk to children like adults would have spoken to him back in the 50s. So, you know, he was stranger danger, and I've had to repel angry fathers and upset mothers, and literally going in front of him going, "He's got dementia," because there was nothing about him physically that would have made that apparent.
As his lifelong friend or long-time friend, Alan, how was it for you as a friend seeing John's demise?
Well, it was hard, but all we wanted to do was to comfort him, not comfort him so that he'd just, you know, work around what problems he was having. And maybe didn't know it was a problem, but, you know, it's like the bang of the table. We're all fine in something, but then something just clicked, didn't it? You know, he sort of wanted to move and trying to calm him down. So it's sad, really, but, you know, we just loved the guy. Did everything we could.
And we had a fab last holiday together that I'd said. In fact, some police colleagues of John had seen, found out how poor he was, and they'd voluntarily done a fundraiser. So I'd said to Alan and Catherine, "Look, I want to take him on a last holiday, but I can't do it on my own. Will you come with us?" But I had to sit them down separately and say, "Look, this is the level of support that I'm going to need." And we had a great time, didn't we? And I suppose what people ought to know as well is that time with Alan, he used to go back to a time where they talk about the rugby, but it lifted John, and well, it lifted both of you, I think, didn't it? B, his memory of all that was so intact, and he was able to be a better version, a more able version of himself. So I don't think anybody should, friends and family being around and getting involved actually has a very positive impact for the person suffering and the person supporting as well.
Were the windows when John realised how ill he was, or when John realised that everything wasn't right?
Yeah. So I think he went through a phase, and this was this was at a time when he was still working, and he started drinking a lot, and he'd drink at rugby do's, but he wasn't generally a big drinker because you were all in your health and fitness, weren't you?
Yeah, we were.
But he used to say to me, "There's something wrong and I don't know what it is. There's something wrong with me and I don't know what it is." But as he descended into it, he lost awareness of it, which I think was a blessing.
He lost his social filter as well at some of the dinners.
God, yeah.
So that
John did cause quite a lot of offence and got people's backs up because he was speaking without any filters at all. And at one occasion, Phil Holmes had asked, would John go on the pitch at Headingley and present Kevin Sinfield with an award for scoring his 500 tries.
It was 500th appearance.
500th appearance, but it was
right,
500th something. Yeah. So I'd said to Phil he would love to do it, and he said, "Will you be there?" And I went, "Nope, nowhere near it." So I said, "But if you get him on that pitch, and chances are he will click into that. This is me, the rugby player, but it might not. And you've got to be ready to get that microphone away from him because he could say anything about Kevin or about anybody else that would have no basis in truth, would just be what occurred to him." So
that was the last really public thing I think he did, didn't it?
But I think people didn't realise. I think they just thought he's a bit of a pain, really. He's behaving badly, but he was ill.
Is there anything you wish you'd done differently during the stages of John's illness?
I wish I'd seen the problems his boss was seeing sooner, because maybe if they'd got him on some kind of medication sooner, it might have helped. But I think the best thing was that I didn't realise how bad it was going to get, so that was a blessing. I think I'd ask for help. Ask for help earlier, because by the time the system's kicked in and you're getting help, we'd often gone past the point of needing that particular support by the time it was offered to us. But rely on friends and family and tell people what's going on.
Do you feel that John maybe knew but didn't want to face up to what was happening?
I think at one point, that's why he was drinking, because if he was drinking, he could say, "Well, I don't remember, I'd had a drink." But then he stopped drinking altogether. So I don't remember.
Yeah, I'd take him for rides out. We said, go in car. Yeah. We'd go out. I'd take him for a ride out where he liked to ride. And we'd always go up to the Kilburn White Horse. That was his favourite little jaunt. And I could always talk about going to train there in 1967, 68, ready for Wembley. And it brought back memories, not only to John, and he was so calm and comfortable.
Yeah, he was.
And I had some great pictures taken with him. Even in that little cafe. We'd go and sit there, and he was happy there.
Yeah, it was.
And it was so comforting to take him on these little rides out. York, North Yorkshire, big circular trip. And he was calm enough in front, he just loved it. And
When did you lose John?
23rd of December 2017. And he'd stopped eating by this point, more or less. And I'd said to the doctor, because I wanted it to end for him and for me. And he was getting to the point where I was worried at not being able to keep him at home. So on the 22nd of December, I'd thought the care team were coming in. So I was going to go out and do shopping for Christmas. And they weren't coming. By this time, we'd got a girl who came, and she sat up overnight, because at one point he was getting up and wandering. He'd get up for his early shift in the police at 2 a.m, and I was trying to get him back to bed. So this lady was allocated to us when that phase of the illness had gone, and he was sleeping through. But everybody who was in the know said, keep her anyway, because as it deteriorates you might need her again. Anyway, he was sitting in his dressing gown. He'd got one of these recliner chairs. We'd had a great week, because the doctor had said he probably wouldn't go long beyond Christmas. And I said to him, "Right, darling, I've got to go out. I've got to leave you with Miriam. I'm just going to nip into the supermarket." It's about 10 o'clock at night. And I came back, and this little care worker was like, "Well, something's happened. We thought he'd had a stroke." So I'd been told if we couldn't move him, get the ambulance involved. It was kind of the Black Friday break-up from work. So rang the ambulance team. They arrived at 4 in the morning and wanted to take him to hospital because he was fairly unresponsive. And I said, no, just put him in bed. And the ambulance driver's going, he's dying. So I said, yeah, put him in bed. And he woke up next morning and he died that morning. And if he'd gone to hospital, he would have probably died on a corridor surrounded by loads of drunks. So he just, very peacefully, he woke up, we were talking, and his pulse in his hand just stopped. So it was a very, very peaceful. And for that, I'm really grateful.
How much do you miss him, Alan?
A lot. A lot, really.
When I saw you, you were packing up the game, and you were sitting in the corner with tears in you.
That's true. Yes, that's true, Colin.
What
Yes,
made you
after the
change your
wedding.
mind?
Well, the lads. I miss the lads. Finest bunch of lads in the world, rugby players. Whether they play for Leeds or anybody else, Colin. They're great ones. And I miss them, really. I miss the game, everything about it, always. You know, the dressing rooms. I just generally miss the game.